I do think that the efforts to create schools all over the globe which reflect those values of dialogue, of openness, of diversity, are one of the best things that is being done in the name of the Hizmet movement. To Turkey with the Historical but I think that there is the notion of peace. My name is Joe Bankoff. At the moment, I am working at the Georgia Institute of Technology, where I chair the Sam Nunn School of International Affairs, part of the College of Liberal Arts at Georgia Tech. But my longest-standing connection probably has been both as a lawyer for some 33 years at a law firm based here in Atlanta, but practicing lots of places. I was introduced to the Hizmet movement really when I was at the Woodruff Arts Center. I was invited to partake in a discussion at what was then called, I think, the Istanbul Center, and was participated in a couple of programs where I just went to listen to talks, and was then invited, if I was interested, to make a trip with the Atlantic Center to Istanbul, and frankly to tour parts of Turkey just as a familiarization, and participated in one of those trips. My guess it's probably been 5-6 years ago. Well, I started from not knowing a thing about the Hizmet movement. In fact, I had heard of Gülen, but I had not really had any occasion to make any study of it. But I was really interested at the time with my interest in the arts, and particularly because we were working with artists and organizations all over the world as part of the Woodruff Arts Center in learning more about it. I would say that at the outset of my trip to Istanbul, I was really taken with the vibrancy of the Turkish economy, of the welcome, of the sense of place that existed, and it became clear that the work of the movement was built around trying to make people understand or be introduced or just be comfortable with the diversity that exists in the world. And so I was taken in the course of that first trip to several of the schools and to sites around that are important to the history of Turkey, but also to have a better sense of what was going on as an effort across the globe to spread the notion of an interdenominational or even intra-denominational effort to make people more comfortable and understand each other. Never have had the opportunity to meet Mr. Gülen, but I have read through parts of the materials, certainly some of the histories, several of the summaries, and I have to say that it is clear that he's had an enormously outsized impact for a single individual on a global movement. And what interests me perhaps the most about it is it's not really a political movement at all. It occasionally is labeled that way, but I don't see it that way. What I see is an effort really through primarily education, education of children in schools, but education of adults and opportunities to meet and exchange with others, that have given rise to the notion that there are pathways to better understanding. And so I respect the effort that he has made and the impact he has had, and think that we would have a better place if more people paid attention. I think it appears to me to have been one of the key priorities of Mr. Gulen, but also the movement itself, to establish schools and education. I do think that it is, as someone who has worked in education when I was at the Woodruff Arts Center and seen the importance of arts and culture and tradition as a way of shaping attitudes about sharing and the value of diversity, that the efforts that have been made in creating schools and in creating learning opportunities or exchange opportunities have been probably, I think, the most important thing. It, as I say, doesn't strike me at all as a political agenda, but much more of a quest for a better understanding of people by people. I am no authority on Islam or any of its various variants, but I think that it is an important example of how someone of faith, in a faith, can extend a clear hand of understanding to other faiths. And particularly in the United States, following the 9/11 attacks, there has been a demonization of Muslim society, of the faith. It is both unwarranted, unfair, and uninformed, but the reality is it exists. And so to have an example that demonstrates the value of how what the prophet actually taught differs from what's being practiced in his name is really an important thing for them to be doing. And I think it's very important in terms of a better global understanding. Well, if you ask what are the movements that have made a difference in the world, actually when you look at the tenets, the core tenets of most of the faith of the globe, whether we're talking about Hindu, whether we are talking about the Jewish traditions, there is the notion of peace, there's the notion of sharing, there's a notion of the value of family, there's a notion of the value of education, there's a notion that there's a brotherhood of mankind. And I think that I find more similarities in some respects than differences. There are all kinds of traditional and cultural differences. There's a different tradition of faith, there's a different tradition of practice. But what is shared in common, whether it is Gandhi or Martin Luther King or Mr. Gülen, is the notion that violence begets only violence, and that the best way to build a base for peace is having an understanding of others, an appreciation of others, and a valuing of the differences instead of fear out of the differences. And that, I think, is an important common characteristic. I've had the opportunity when I was visiting in Turkey, certainly the first time, to visit several of the schools that had been created in the Hizmet system, and was struck by several things. One was the focus on education. I am very much used to being exposed, certainly in the American high school, to big trophy cases, and there are all kinds of athletic awards and, cups for winning this championship and that sort of thing. And what I found that was particularly interesting to me as somebody who had grown up with a scientific background was that the trophy cases in the schools were celebrating prizes in physics and competitions for inventions and competitions for robotics. And it isn't just that they were the brain in the jar, because they did have the athletics. I got beat soundly playing ping pong with some of the students. But the reality was that there was a clear emphasis on education in a much more open sense, and evaluation of people who were not just great athletes, but people who had great skills and great differences. So I really was quite taken, and I do think that the efforts to create schools all over the globe which reflect those values of dialogue, of openness, of diversity, are one of the best things that is being done in the name of the Hizmet movement. I have not had a lot of firsthand experience to what I know is a very large effort on behalf of the movement to provide aid, particularly in areas of conflict and distress. I'm aware that it does exist, and I do think that the courage that it takes to go where it's needed is a testament to sort of the foundations of actually walking and doing what you say you think and want to do. And so I salute the effort. I know little about the mechanics of it, but it is entirely consistent with the notion that if we're going to find peace in the world, we have to start by helping those that are most distressed. I think it is a common human phenomenon that people fear what they don't understand. We're sort of wired that way, going back to protecting ourselves against saber-toothed tigers. If we don't know what something is, or if it's a change of something that we're comfortable with, it's a threat. And oftentimes people respond to threats with fear or with anger or with anxiety. We live in a completely polarized society at the moment. And so it's no surprise that people would say, well, this is a political movement, or it's too good to be true. But I do think that the effort and the influence that this movement has shown on a global basis, the ability to motivate people all over the world who may read Dr. Gülen or hear of him or hear his talk, makes it really hard to say that this is anything more than a way of enabling people who want to be good citizens of this globe to find a way to do that and to welcome others to the cause. So, yes, I'm not surprised that there's all kinds of criticism and doubt, because it's a matter that seems both somehow more outsized, that is, a global reach than you would expect. This is not a charity working in a community. This is not somebody trying to build a school. This is a global movement. And I think its impact is global in nature, and so it probably does threaten a lot of people who feel that somehow this is not either too good to be true or not correct. It was the trip to Turkey with the Istanbul Center that really was my first time in Turkey, and I can't separate out easily my impressions of Turkey in that first trip from the impressions of the movement or what the movement was contributing. I was really taken with what I thought and still think is an amazing place. It is both literally and physically the bridge between cultures. It's been the bridge between centuries. I mean, Istanbul has been conquered several times back and forth. And what you begin to understand is in this crucible of really the globalized civilization, there was, at the time of my first visit, just a vibrant middle class, that a country which did not operate off of oil revenues, which was Muslim at its core, but not exclusively Muslim, that respected religions, that on the other hand wanted to keep religion out of government, at least at that time. Then there was this notion of how you have an economy in which the young people see they have a future. And we see a lot of strife in the world right now created by countries where 40% of the population is under 25 and see no future, because that's a tinderbox. But whereas I saw in Turkey, there was clearly a sense that there's an opportunity for everybody to participate. What I then saw in the schools was a way of really helping prepare the next generation of leaders in business, of leaders in faith, of leaders in all kinds of activities, as a serious undertaking with this sort of grounding about the importance of diversity and the importance of trying to find a path to peace. So I came to associate what I saw as much of the great future of Turkey, of the sense of presence, of enterprise, as something that was being cherished by the Hizmet movement, but at the same time was being, the movement was creating a foundation of education which would continue and provide those pathways for others.
I think that Hizmet's ability to create spaces for persons from one culture or ethnic group or religion to meet persons of other ethnic groups, populations, religions, is a very positive thing.
I think Mr. Gülen is almost like a hermit or like a mystic who has a very deep spiritual life. And I think that accounts for the attraction he has to others.